From the John M. Huntsman Center, this is Ute Women's Basketball. Chris Tunis courtside. Lloyd Cole helping us out in the studios here in Salt Lake City. And we welcome you to what could be a record-setting night.
Well, I met Chris for the first time when I started at KSL in this market almost 10 years ago.
I became acquainted with Chris as a listener.
When I first met Chris, he was working for KSL Radio.
And he came up and introduced himself and did his usual handshake. He had this funny thing. He had a handshake and a little bow that he would do to you.
And was fortunate enough to be selected as, I guess, his first intern at KSL Radio. And that's when I got to really know Chris as a person. Before then, it was all by reputation. But I knew enough that to be Chris Tunis' intern was a pretty big deal. I was really happy because Chris was, again, he was the man.
Chris, he was a very nice man, which is what most people will tell you.
I've never been around anybody who was nicer to me than Chris.
He was sort of a Charlie Rose of sports radio. You know, he was a gentleman.
He was a true professional in terms of being a craftsman, yet he was also just a very genuine and lovable human being.
He was an excellent father. He was always there for my daughter.
He would give opinions on talk shows, but he never made things personal, never got angry, never got nasty with people, always treated coaches and players and callers to call-in shows with the greatest amount of respect.
He had to interview me many times when I, wasn't a happy camper after losing. And he was phenomenal.
Chris Tunis, the Tuna Man on the radio.
I felt when I was on the show with him, which was a number of times, I always felt that, I wasn't going to get cornered, that I wasn't going to get confronted with anything.
He was someone that people liked and liked listening to. It just happened to be very, very good at his job.
Chris brought sports radio to the forefront. People tuned in to listen to Chris Tunis.
I thought of Chris and still think of Chris as a sports talk pioneer.
Chris had things throughout the day, updates and things that carried it through, which paved the way for 3 talk radio stations now, sports talk radio stations now.
But what he was doing on a limited basis with his sports talk show in the evening was introducing a genre or a format to the market that was a little bit ahead of its time.
They were thinking about starting a talk radio, sports talk radio in Salt Lake. They approached him to start Sports Radio 570, which was the first full-time sports radio talk show in Salt Lake.
Chris was I think the natural choice to start that up. When the owners of 570 determined they were going to switch to that format, he became their natural choice.
He was a real versatile guy. He could do play-by-play. He could do a radio show. He could do interviews. He was pretty much a broad-based reporter who was competent at all.
Now she says go with 8 seconds to go. Badon drives left of the lane. She's at the top of the key with 4. Right side, Rodriguez going to take the jump shot with 1.8 seconds to go and hits it at the buzzer.
Chris was a nut for having the facts and the little tidbits and the information.
He was very, very detail-oriented.
Elaine Elliott coaches the Utes. We've been saying that for 27 years now. 559 wins, 223 losses, 15 times to the NCAA tournament, twice to the Sweet 16, once to the Elite 8.
When he was preparing for the job, for whatever game he was doing, he'd go through the press guides and he would try and pick out some interesting facts.
He was well prepared at everything he did, and when he came into the games, he knew.
His job was his passion. I mean, he really enjoyed sports. He enjoyed the atmosphere. He enjoyed the teams. He enjoyed getting to know the players on the teams.
I can't remember when Chris didn't do our games. I think somebody else did it way back when, and somebody did it in between, and I can only tell you that Chris did it.
He left broadcasting full-time in 2000.
He had kind of transitioned away from radio full-time, but he was still in it because he loved sports and loved sports radio and loved being part of the story.
When he left full-time broadcasting and went into the publishing side of media, he kept his hand in the business by calling games.
He was at call at that point in time. He was doing Utah women's basketball.
Ski left side, Kaylee Whipple, screened by Sawyer. Three-pointer, Whipple, good. That's really good teamwork there.
The special part of Chris and women's basketball at the U was that, I mean, he really made us feel like he chose that. I mean, if he had a choice and could do the men or the women, he made us feel like his preference was to do the women.
It didn't matter whether it was women's basketball or whether it was the Utah Jazz or whether it was the Bees or whether it was Utah football.
He truly, really cared about him.
He got sick originally in the fall of 2005, and he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
But even when he was sick, Chris never complained about it.
He just continued to work. It was good therapy for him. He really kind of enjoyed going to the games.
The illness, multiple times, I mean, it was over the course of 3 or 4 years, never changed who he was.
He was always positive. He never felt sorry for himself.
I think the first time he got sick, they were able to beat it. And I remember I would see him and say, I'm 2 years cancer-free.
In the fall of 2009, he went for a routine checkup. By chance, they found some abnormalities in his blood work. They did some scans. They found that he had a reoccurrence of the cancer.
I remember being surprised to hear that it had taken a turn for the worse again, because when I'd recently seen him, or last seen him, he seemed to be better.
And again, he was doing pretty well. He was getting his strength back. And then in August of 2010, he developed another infection, and he just didn't have anything left to fight it with, so he passed.
Chris's legacy to me was one that showed you can still be a consummate pro, you can still be fanatically dedicated to your craft, you can be the best in your business, and you don't need to stop being a good guy.
He was just what I would call the ultimate professional. And on a personal side, one of the best people I've ever been around in this business or out of this business. Always had a smile and a kind word to say about you. So he's definitely missed. And I know we missed him this year. I know the women's basketball team that he was such a big part of missed him this past year. But the good thing is he left an impact in this market on a lot of people, and he's not going to be forgotten.
Certainly there'll be, broadcasters to come, and there are certainly people of talent in his industry. But there won't ever be anyone for Utah women's basketball like Chris Tunis.
And our thanks to you for listening. And before an energized crowd of 1,023 tonight in the Huntsman Center, Utah pulls it out 60-57 over the New Mexico Lobos. Chris Tunis from the Huntsman, good night.